First, remove the top cover by turning the 8 screws counterclockwise 1/4 turn and lift cover away. Next, disconnect the RF input and power connections to the RF amplifier assembly. Then follow the black cable sleeve to the power supply control board and disconnect the cable and pull back to the RF amplifier assembly. On the other side of the RF amplifier assembly, disconnect the RF output. Locate another black cable sleeve and follow it to its mating connector and disconnect. We are now ready to remove the RF amplifier assembly out of the transmitter. Remove the 4 Phillips screws that hold the amp assembly to the chassis. Screws are located on the side of the transmitter. From the top, lift the amplifier assembly straight up and out and set it down. Now to remove the power supply. Remove the 3 Phillips screws that hold it to the RF amplifier assembly. There will be 1 screw on top of the assembly and 2 on the bottom. Then turn the assembly so the power supply is facing you. Grab the supply and pull towards you. You may have to spread the RF amplifier assembly apart to remove the supply. Mark the spade lugs with appropriate letter or symbol. Disconnect the lugs from the AC input and DC output of the supply. Open the new box to the new power supply. Notice that the supply is much smaller and there will have to be some modifications done to the RF amplifier assembly. Connect the new supply with a power cable to a 110 volt outlet to adjust the supply to 28 volts DC. Use a multimeter to measure the supply output. Turn the blue pot on the left with the tweaker until the multimeter reads 28 volts DC. Since the old supply only had 1 positive and 1 negative terminal, each lug had 2 cables in it. The new supply has 2 positive and 2 negative terminals. We can now split the cables up. Cut off the lugs one at a time and crimp on new spade terminals. Make sure to mark them after you crimp so you know which ones are positive and which ones are negative connections. Now we must modify the RF amplifier assembly chassis to fit the new supply. We will need to drill 2 holes, one on top of the RF amplifier assembly and the other on the bottom. Looking at the top of the assembly, locate the hole that is to the top right of the danger high voltage sticker. Measure across 6 and 11/16 inches and 15/16 inches up from the edge. Mark it and use a center punch to punch a small hole to keep the drill bit centered. Drill the hole with a 3/16 bit. Make sure to deburr the hole so the supply will sit flush. Do the other side the exact same way. Connect the AC and DC cables from the old supply to the new supply. To install the new power supply into the RF amplifier assembly, make sure the fan on the power supply faces to the front of the transmitter. Using 4 M4 by 20 screws and 4 11mm spacers, attach the power supply to the RF amplifier assembly. Supply should be centered in the RF input assembly when complete. To reinstall the RF amplifier assembly, set it in from the top with the high voltage sticker up. Make sure the RF input cables are out of the way. Make sure the AC and DC cables are tucked underneath of the exhaust fan before moving the RF amplifier assembly into final placement. Reinstall the 4 Phillips screws that attach the RF amplifier assembly to the transmitter case. Reinstall the RF output cable to the RF amplifier assembly. Connect the power supply AC cable to its mating connector, and run the DC cable from the power supply to the power supply control board and plug it in. Connect the RF amplifier power cable and the RF input cable to RF amplifier assembly. Now connect the transmitter via the Type N connector to a load that can handle 100 watts. Plug in the transmitter to 110 volt outlet as well. Turn the power switch of the transmitter on and measure the DC voltages on the power supply control board. The first voltage point you can use is any of the 4 vias that are to the left of the large capacitor. This voltage is the plus 28 volts DC from the power supply that was just replaced. The other 3 voltage points have test points labeled across the top of the power supply control board. They are plus 20 volts, plus 5 volts, and minus 20 volts. The transmitter operates normally with the new supply. Remove the RF cable and power cord and install the top cover by turning the 8 screws clockwise 1/4 turn. If you're required to make power supply cables, here's a list of parts required. Here is a list of the power supply connections.